January 6, 2022, the special meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, may I have the roll?
Councilmember Hatley. Councilmember Goodson.
Yes.
Councilmember Riggs.
Here.
Councilmember Pittman.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Vice Mayor Thompson. Mayor Reynolds.
Here. Will you stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Salute.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Looking for a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion carries with 7 yeses and 0 nos.
Okay, at this time, we will open the meeting up for public hearing at 6:01. One item for public hearing, fourth public hearing to receive public input on and provide input regarding the composition of potential council member election district boundaries.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. What you have before you tonight for your consideration is the public hearing for input from our community regarding the districting or redistricting of our community. This is the fourth public hearing regarding this issue. Tonight we will hear testimony from our community, and then the council will consider all maps that have been submitted to the council. Q2 data and research will provide additional information. Tonight what we're looking for is, after the review of the maps, the testimony from the community, and the council input, is for council to provide us direction, staff, with a map so that we can move forward with an ordinance at our next council meeting. With that, I'll turn over the meeting to the representative, Jane, from Q2 Data and Research.
Thank you. Good evening, Council and members of the public who are joining for tonight's redistricting hearing. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you again, and Happy New Year, Happy Holidays to everyone. So tonight we are back with the draft maps that we created and reviewed at the last public hearing in December. So we have 8 draft maps, quite a few, on the table for consideration tonight. And in the weeks since our last hearing, we've received some public comment regarding these maps, and I'm sure we'll receive more tonight to assist you in your decision with how you want to move forward with any of these. So as a reminder, as just was stated, at the end of this, we would like to finalize a map that we can bring for introduction of an ordinance at the next hearing. And so any of these 8 maps could be that map. You could choose to make modifications to one of them that is closest to the most suitable map for you. So any live mapping can be done tonight to adjust or modify according to public comment or your opinion. And any of these maps could be, unchanged and adopted. So with that, I will turn it to the council unless you would like me to review all 8 of the maps. Or if there are a particular map that you're interested in right off the bat, sort of making changes to or looking at again. Since we do have quite a large number, I figured I would ask before getting into a longer review of all of them.
Does anyone on the council find it necessary to review the maps before we have public input?
I have one question I'd like to ask.
Councilmember Pittman?
Yeah. Thank you. I'm looking at map 1 in the packet, and then map 29, draft map 29. What's the difference between those two?
Certainly. So let me share my screen and I'll show you those two. So here is map 1, draft map 1. And this has all of your districts here, and the boundaries are labeled, but and I'll just turn on 29 really quickly to remind everyone what that looks like. So here is 29, and you'll see that this District F actually is up on Feather River here. And for draft map 1, it is below Feather River. And so one of the communities of interest that we heard from was the historic district, which I just turned on in blue. And this is where the historic district is. So in draft map 1, it is divided between District A and District F. And then in draft map 29, you'll see that it's actually mostly kept together, except for this corner here. And so those are sort of some of the differences between the two maps. Really is that District F in the center.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes.
Anyone else from the dais have any questions? Having none, Madam Clerk, do we have any comments from the public?
Mr. Mayor, our first speaker, hold on.
How many speakers do you have?
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, there are 9 speakers. Our first speaker is Celia Hirschman.
How much time do I have?
You have 3 minutes. Oh,
Thank you for allowing me.
Mike's on.
Resident.
No, there it is. Okay, it's on.
Oh, okay. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I am a downtown historic district resident. I've been a downtown resident in the same house for 12 years. I've organized many events downtown, from the Historic District Neighborhood Watch to a free monthly newsletter written by the residents called the Montgomery Street News, the free tiny food pantry, police presence at the Halloween on Montgomery Street, and much more. I also organized the Historic District Neighborhood Watch, where we sued Cal Water for their outrageous pricing and advocating to close the meth motel. Our downtown historic district is the poorest area next to Southside in Oroville. Our concerns have rarely been the focus of the City Council. In fact, you've just approved a beer and alcohol market on the corner of the worst crime area in Oroville. Why? When the previous councils had made it the gateway to the historic district. We need representation on the council. I want a historic district, and only a historic district representation, either from homeowner or a renter. We don't want council members who serve other interests representing our district. In other words, otherwise, downtown will never get the proper representation it deserves. I only support maps 1, 2, 3, 29, and 40. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Bobby O'Reilly.
Good evening, Council. There are many maps that have been created, submitted, and looked at. Of those, some make sense, some do not. It is my understanding that of those maps, there have been some council members that have had conversation with citizens regarding their stance on the maps and the redistricting, and that they favor certain maps due to the layout of the district to benefit their election or future campaign, so as to or not to run against others. Need I remind the council that the reason for this redistricting, it was forcefully put in place to allow fairness and equality in future elections. Certain guidelines and criteria had to be met when composing the districts. The redistricting and the maps before you are for you to choose the best and most reasonable district layout for the next 10 years, not to appease future campaign dreams and ambitions. Hopefully, none of the current sitting council is conceited enough to feel they will win a future election, especially based on where their district may end up. The purpose of these meetings is to receive public input on the topic so that you, as an elected representative we put here, can base the decision on the will of the people. I will tell you that as of now, the people are not feeling heard, but rather that you are being forced to listen to them. I respectfully ask you, as our elected council, to please change that appearance. Make people feel like they are being heard. The next few years are going to be hard enough with these new changes, and something so simple as being heard can go such a long way. Thank you and have a blessed evening.
Our next public speaker is Jason Corona.
All right, just testing there. Okay. In the early months after the campfire that brought me to Oroville, I would often hear from folks, "Oh, you live in Oroville." And I took much delight in my response that we have a gorgeous, historic, and artistic downtown that I get to wake and be a part of each day. I asked that the council please consider 29 and 40 in support of maintaining a historic downtown district. This allows homeowners and renters alike in the area a voice from someone who understands the benefits that have either brought us here or enticed us to stay here, and understands and lives in the issues that we face. This gives us a wonderful opportunity to protect one of the gateways to the city and advocates economic growth, positive property values, and most importantly, an ever-improving name that Oroville has among residents of Butte County. I believe that this is the best way to ensure our downtown can continue to be walkable, safe, and preserved. Our waterways can be clean and thriving with family activity, and that planning issues can be addressed that best serve the needs and desires of the community members within. Thank you.
To remind the public that we are in a meeting, it's okay to show your approval, but let's keep order too.
The next speaker is Julie Miller.
Hello, Council. I have 2 emails from citizens that could not attend tonight but would like me to read. This first email is from Shara Sheard. She's a historic district resident. I really believe that we need a city council representative from the historic district that walks the walk, so to speak. We need someone who lives down here with us that may have had to call 911 for an intruder, that has had to move homeless along down the street, has had to regularly pick up their recyclables after being rifled through on a weekly basis. We need someone who recognizes our determination to do our part to ensure that Oroville's historical past is not forgotten as we move forward with progress. We need someone who knows this district like we do and who is willing to bring this treasure of a neighborhood to the place we all want to be, where families feel safe, where I can go out walking at night without fear, and where I can go to bed each night knowing my family is safe. I want someone who knows Miners Alley and its perils and pitfalls. I want someone who has experienced all of this and can tell me, I know, I understand, and this is what I'm doing to help. I implore the council to approve Map 29 as it is the best layout that would give downtown citizens a true voice to be heard in all things. Maps 34, 47, and 53 combine our neighborhood with areas that have not probably experienced the same things as we have. I understand that pleasing everyone with these boundary lines is never going to happen, and someone is always going to be left out. All I can do is raise my voice and hope that I am heard. This email is from Raul and Maxine Leclerc. They live also in the historic district. We reside in the home that we own, and I'm not going to give the address. This property is located in the downtown historic area district. We have reviewed all of the proposed redistricting maps and encourage you to utilize maps 2, 3, 29, or 40 for redistricting purposes because each of these maps attends to the special concerns of the inhabitants of the downtown historic district. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Natalie Sheard.
Ms. Miller, council member has a question for you. Council member Goodson.
Yes, it's very quickly. You can stay right there. Thank you. The first email was
Still not Shara Sheard. You should also have gotten these emails as well.
Thank you. I have a letter too from someone who could not attend who asked me to read. Someone who lives in the downtown district. As I have previously communicated, historic downtown residents have interests and challenges unique to living in the urban core of downtown. We must have our own representation in decisions that will impact our quality of life economic development, historic and cultural preservation, and a vision for our historic district overlay. That is why I support public submission maps 1, 2, 3, 29, or 40. That is why I also assert the proposed maps 34, 47, and 53 are unsuitable to represent our community. We should not blur the lines and be represented by people who do not live in our district and who do not share our concerns and needs. This is a pivotal decision that will have a major impact on our community. I am very concerned that the redistricting process may be seen as an opportunity by the current political bloc to manipulate our district maps to further consolidate their voting power. This is a phenomenon known as gerrymandering. It would be extremely short-sighted for politicians to lock our city into unsuitable districts for the next 10 years when they themselves will no longer be in office just a few short years from now. Susanna Wedgwood, homeowner, downtown Oroville.
Our next speaker is Luke Sheard.
I too am reading a email from Audrey Holt. And she writes, as downtown residents for 8 years, my husband and I are only in support of any districting map that keeps our already established downtown historic overlay district completely intact with no additions or subtractions. This is a long-established legal and clear district, as well as a distinct community of interest with its own unique assets and challenges. Audrey Holt, and they live right here on Oak. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Stephanie Holstein.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see everybody again twice in 1 week. That's pretty amazing. I love it. Feels like that real family community environment that we searched for when we came to Oroville. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about the historic district and what it means to my family. It's the uniqueness of the historic district, which I feel really draws the community together like a bond. And that's a very powerful experience to feel when you can look at your neighbors and think, we are sharing something together in life. And it's really, really wonderful. And it's what we searched for and why we're here in Oroville, why we chose the historic district. We celebrate the entrepreneurs' endeavors in our little downtown area. We appreciate the artistic expression that's on display and encouraged in the historic district. Fine art, you see the antiquated architecture that is treasured here that other cities wish they had, I think. Quite simply, we practice caring about each other, and that's powerful too. The neighborhood and the neighbors in the historic district, I feel that we are kind of like stewards of the past. I don't know if it's what it is that draws us to want to do this, to labor endlessly, to straighten out houses, right? Pull the pants back up on them, straighten out the hats on some of these houses that may have not have had the best care in most recent years. And we do it and we love it and we get dusty. And we look back and we go, this is great, look, you're doing it too, this is wonderful. And we feel that together. It's very, very powerful. The historic district is precious to those of us who live here. And we laboriously work to preserve it and honor the history of this town. And quite honestly, my family, we're always inviting people to come to Oroville and see it for themselves, see how lovely it is. Don't listen to anything you're hearing. Come and see it for yourself, witness it for yourself. It's the beauty of Oroville. I think that's very powerful too. The proposed map number 29, in my opinion, the lines, the way they're drawn, I remember the vendor that is working with creating this, the one who's joining us on Zoom. She said, look for the natural boundaries and the bonds and things that tie the communities together. That's the best way to create these districts and have your percentages. I know that's the big task for numbers, for representation for everyone. And I feel map 29 best exemplifies that. And I really think that it shows and holds that bond of the historic district together. So, I gravitate towards map 29. I hope you will as well. And thank you very much for your time. I appreciate all the efforts that you're doing for this. I know it's not easy, but I believe together we can make this happen. So again, I'm voting for map.
Time. Our next speaker is Kay Castro.
Give you a little historical background on the historic district. My dad could not attend tonight, but I'm reading from the Mercury Register, Our Town, in 1999. My father's interest in Butte County never waned, and in 1957, Lenhoff helped found the Butte County Historical Society and became the first editor of its Diggins Quarterly newsletter. When the dam came to town, Lenhoff got involved in saving historical landmarks with the formation of the Oroville Heritage Council. Several historic places were in danger of demolition, including the Miners Alley Block, the Bidwell Bar Bridge, and the Mother Orange Tree. The alley was to be raised for new buildings, and the bridge and tree were in the path of the dam. However, the Heritage Council mobilized and lobbied to save the downtown buildings and got them placed on the National Register of Historic Places. This council, not this council, but the Oroville City Council, has already passed an ordinance with our historic overlay. It is part of the Planning Commission. The Historic Advisory Commission is part of the Planning Commission. The current map 29 is a natural boundary for this historic overlay that's already in place and is already in the National Historic Registry of Buildings. Several of these buildings are on the National Registry. I'm just thinking that besides these National Register of Historic Places, my dad bought the house on Montgomery Street, built in 1878, and he currently still lives there today. We have very unique and wonderful boundaries already set for our historic downtown district. And I'm just kind of wondering why we're messing with them, to be honest with you. And I'm looking forward to hearing from the submitters. Is that a word? Submitters? Mm-hmm. Don't tell my English teacher mom. The submitters of those maps, why they think that across Feather River or past Washington Avenue is part of this historic district that's already established. I also have an email here from Robert Hewitt that he asked me to read. Please consider that the historic downtown Oroville is integral to the health of the entire city of Oroville and South Butte County. I would ask you, the council, to maintain the integrity of the downtown area and not dilute it by combining it with non-contiguous populations or areas. His tagline on his email is, treat people as if they were what they ought to be, and you help them to become what they are capable of being, by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. And I implore you to be that caliber of people on our council to vote for map 29. Thank you. Sorry about my voice. Thank you.
Our last public speaker is John Schultz.
Yeah, my name's John Schultz. I've lived on Montgomery Street for 20 years and been a member of the Chamber of Commerce for almost as long. And I've looked at the maps and such, and my view is I can't speak for other neighborhoods, but I go with 1, 2, 3, 29 or 40. I like the neighborhood I live in, and we've had some problems over the last few years, more so in the last 2 years. I can only echo what our first speaker said, Cecilia. I was in the same neighborhood watch when we brought up concerns about Cal Water, etc. I think that the downtown district is different from other areas in Oroville, and every district's different. But I don't like the idea of breaking up downtown Oroville into 2 or 3 slices. So that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, that is the last of the public speakers.
Thank you for everyone's input. Do we have any comments from the dais? Vice Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight.
Thursdays are my worst evening to get together and come to city council. In fact, I have a regular scheduled Thursday meeting that I postponed a little bit so I can be here to listen to you guys tonight. It's actually quite interesting to hear how much contention is over these maps. Just as a council member, I can speak from what I've heard. Obviously, we're not allowed to speak with one another and to a certain degree to violate the Brown Act. But from what I've heard from most council members in this whole process, it's been quite a while, is an overwhelming sense from most of the council members that this process has been forced on all of us. So unless I'm completely out of the loop, the idea of gerrymandering, maybe I'm just out of the gerrymandering loop, but the conversations at least I've had with our mayor is just letting the lines lay where they lay and understanding that for the most part, there are groups that will knit together. And I do know that the most tight-knit groups that it seems like in our community are the South Side. There's a real ownership of South Side. Quite a few comments made about South Side, and you only understand South Side if you live in that South Side, or, there's and also it sounds like a similar feeling with the historic district. And I think we all understand, at least for me, I understand that the lines are going to lay where they are. And I absolutely support, the historic district being a historic district. I used to live downtown in the historic district, and you have to absolutely love that area to live in that area. And because it has its absolute challenges. In the year that I lived on High Street, there was a homicide across the street from our house. There was a car chase that ended up in my neighbor's garage behind my house. The police in the middle of the day when my kids were playing outside, tackled a gentleman literally right in front of our house. And the amount of flies down there, it's just crazy. So anyway, I hear you guys' support. It's like mostly there's a kind of frustration with Southside that you guys are feeling like you're getting chopped up. But I have no problem with either Southside or with the historic district staying as a whole. And I'm sorry that you guys feel, which I think most of us up here on this council feel, a frustration with this whole process of dividing Oroville. I, for one, even though I don't live in the historic district or Southside, I definitely view Oroville as one. And I hope that with this dividing of the lines that come through Oroville, that the future of this council doesn't begin to fight over, money to go towards their district, because the reality is we are a community. We are Oroville, and we're going to continue to be Oroville. And again, even though I don't live in the historic district, I believe that my heart represents as well the historic district. I don't think somebody can be in Oroville without visiting. You can't even go to City Hall without being in the historic district of downtown. So we're one. I feel that we're one, and even again, as the future goes, I will continue to fight for all the different departments, whether it be South Oroville, Thermalito, what do you call it, my East Side? East Side, West Side. There are gang signs here as far as our districts go. But again, I'm just sad that it just seems very contentious. The atmosphere is real tense here tonight, because the reality is we're a small town, a very tight-knit, amazing community. I've been in a lot of the communities, and my sister used to live in, I know I'm talking too much, I'll finish up with this. My sister used to live in Southern California, and a lot of people desire to live in Southern California. It's a nice place to visit, but I tell you what, when you come back into Oroville, drive in over Highway 70, and you come into the community, Oroville is definitely a place you feel like this is a place I can hang my hat and call home. And I'm just sad that we're being chopped up like this. This is something that's being pushed on us from the state. And I just believe that the lines are going to lay where they are. And whoever's on the council after that is who it is. And I'm looking forward to somebody representing the historic district on this council. I don't think there's anybody that lives there right now on this dais. But that's all I have to say. So,
Councilmember Pittman.
Yeah, thank you. Certainly appreciate everyone's input. We only make good decisions after we have good input. So whatever decision we make, you'll be all part of that. Just a short bit of history. The adjustment is necessary here because we had a census occurred. We've had one district map that was drawn before the census, and now the census occurred. Now we had to adjust it again. I can't think of any better definition of a community of interest than a historic district. I mean, the council in the 70s actually set up and mapped this particular space of the community out, so it makes sense. I don't know of a better definition than the historic district. You can look at all the areas of definition by the subdivision names. I don't know how many in here know where Orange Heights is. Couple do. That's Hammond Avenue. And the other different subdivisions we have, we didn't keep those names around. So it's just, you could call it community of interest, but that doesn't really fit because we don't use that daily. I think that clearly the 15 plus messages and emails that I know as a councilman I've received, and tonight's discussion with you folks being here has sent a pretty clear message that you'd like to see the historic district stay as intact as possible. And I believe there's a couple maps that do that, and I will be supporting those maps as we move through this process. But I'll also echo the fact that we're all representatives for you. We spend your money, and there's going to be a great sadness coming in the next election. Some of you may not know this, but that if you live in a district that doesn't have a person running, you won't get to vote for a councilman. And I find that appalling. I find that just purely appalling. It's being brought up to us by the state, by this districting thing. But many of you, that if the few council positions that'll be, terming out and going for re-election, you're going to get a ballot that just says for maybe the mayor's selection. That's it. You'll see all these other councilmen on there, but you won't get a ballot to vote for them. I find that appalling. But that's what we're being thrown into, and I don't particularly care for it. Again, I appreciate you all being here, and I think we do have a couple maps here that would satisfy the needs of the community for now as it's being thrown upon us. I share with you the map 29 and the map 1. I didn't know the difference between those two, but I think those are probably good representations to help us in our community interest down the line. So thank you all for being here.
Councilmember Riggs.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo one of the things Mr. Pittman said, that for me, one of the main values of many in this process is ensuring that the most possible districts are represented as soon as possible. And so, unfortunately, what districts get to vote when is already set in place, so there isn't changing that. However, I think it is also unfortunate that some districts, specifically the downtown district, it seems unlikely that they'll be able to acquire a representative sooner rather than later. We'll address that I have made public comments in meetings or in social activities that I believe that Pittman called it the Orange Grove, but I believe it's a Citrus Grove neighborhood.
Orange Heights.
Orange Heights? I
Yes.
thought it was Citrus Grove.
No, Citrus Grove was another down by Storms, but Orange Heights is the Hammond Avenue subdivision.
I appreciate that knowledge.
Well, it's only because my grandfather bought it in bankruptcy when it was first formed years ago. there's a long history that you don't need to share, but that's the way I know about it.
So as I was saying, one of the things that I had mentioned is that region, to me, and that is the neighborhood in which I reside, I believe it to be more akin to, say, the downtown district than, say, the Canyon Highlands area. However, there also is not another map that puts continuity for those continuous areas. So I understand your input, and I totally respect the concept that that area may not have the issues or may have dissimilar issues than the downtown district, and so I totally respect that and appreciate the impact or the insight and the voice that you guys have voiced tonight and over the past few meetings. So thank you for that.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate all of you being out here tonight, and also the interest in the downtown. It's great to see that. just this morning, we had a Downtown Business Association meeting, and some of you participated in that. And so part of the importance and value of revitalization of a downtown is, of course, input and value and involvement. And it's good to see that there's a heightened interest in that. That being said, in my evaluation of the maps, also just another observation, and I'm sure everyone here sees the same thing. The only folks here tonight are the folks that are out of the historic district. I find that kind of interesting. No other person, or at least unless I miss something, you guys are it, which is a little concerning about the rest of our community because everyone should really be engaged in this process. And as I look at the map, and I too, I have to agree, map 29 or map 1 does a good job with the historic piece, but then when I look at the historic piece, it does cross over to the river a little bit. And when looking at this and thinking about community of interest, people of interest, and I think the concern about the unhoused, the homeless was brought up. Some of the crime impacts were brought up, and I think that circle goes a little bit beyond the downtown or what was in this historic area. And then also with the map, there's a little bit of a breakup in considering the rest of the town. Now, they're not here to make their case, but, this Section A, it crosses over the river and it wraps around the downtown. That's when we think about contiguousness, that looks a little weird. And so the focus has been the historic area and then trying to build a map to fit that, rather than what makes the most sense for the entire city, because ultimately it is about the entire city, not just one particular area, though it's very obviously you're here and you have it's near and dear to your heart, and as it should be. I personally work downtown, and so on a personal note, because I work downtown, though I don't live in the downtown area, obviously that's very important, and I think any one of us over time have rallied and fought for the needs of the downtown area. Another thing that and I know you all are passionate about it and you probably don't care about this comment so much, but I think it's important with a small community, and this goes to the bigger issue of districting. I think for rural, small communities, districting makes zero sense. In fact, it does exactly what we're having here tonight. It puts us at odds with one another because this is a small enough community where 4 or 5 blocks over, you're not really into a different area. Like a large metropolitan area like San Francisco, if you live in the Tenderloin or the Mission District or Chinatown, they're very different. And their districting kind of makes sense. And the whole drive behind districting was to allow minority populations a voice. But in small rural towns, it actually can have the opposite effect because just for a little bit of history, so if you have a small minority population, African American, Hispanics, and they're kind of scattered, as they are in our town, we don't have heavy concentrations. There's a finding that it actually has had the opposite effect, where less minorities have had an opportunity to have voice on city councils. And so that's the irony of this whole process. And I think we all recognize that, see that, know that. But so as I just evaluate this, I'm looking at, really blocking the best map that kind of groups everything up, though it doesn't meet your needs, is map 53. It does that, and I would say this, just in terms of addressing, I'm not saying I'm going to vote for that, I'm just saying as far as looking at it, how it groups up everything. And when we think about areas of concern, like for an example, or areas of impact, the high school, Oroville High School, it is a historic building. The students have a heavy impact on the downtown district. The students come in for lunch, before school. They are, and I know this because I work down here, I work with the schools, of course, being with the chamber, I'm aware of some of the impacts on some of the traffic flows and what goes on. And so if I'm just purely looking at areas of interest, areas of impact, who impacts who, and who should care about that, well, ultimately, we all should care about that. But just to have this map that was drawn back in the 70s or whenever it was done, this is our designated historic area, to just do that and say, okay, that council person representing that area, you know, that's their gig, that's what they're going to look out for. I mean, you know, unintended consequences where if there's no encroachments from other areas, then, now I know this council is not this way, but down the line, why should another council person that's a few blocks over care about what happens in the downtown district? Just, it's a question. I think it's a fair question. Maybe it would never be a problem. I would hope it wouldn't be, but I think it's a fair comment to make. You know, when we look at all of this whole entire process and the impact that it's going to have on our community. I think ultimately all the maps are somewhat contiguous. All of them are within the boundaries of the law. And some of them, obviously, we're advocating more strongly for. We feel they fit more our narrative than others. But I would say if we were to hone it down, that either 29-1 or 53. 53 just looks like it kind of, everybody's grouped up in these blocks. But it does cut out some of the historic area. I get that. But if we were to say we're going to be fair to the entire city of Oroville and try to group everybody up as much as we can into areas of concern or like interest, 53 looks better from the bird's eye in that respect. I don't know, and there's others, we're going to weigh in and discuss this, but that's how I'm seeing it. I just don't like this weird little, on map 1 or 29, how it kind of jogs over and it wraps around. It just looks funny to me. And then, you know, you could say, if you were looking at, if I live at the airport, that neighborhood, what interest do I have if I live over by the airport to people that live over by the hatchery? Those are, you know, talk about disjointed, are communities that have no like interest. I would, you know, I mean, that kind of just jumps out. But they're not here tonight, you are. I get that. But I'm just saying, just as right now, as being responsible, because we're all at large elected council people, folks, that we have to look at the full picture, and consider every aspect here. And frankly, I don't know why there aren't other people from other parts of the city not here, but certainly you are, and I appreciate that. And it warms my heart to know that there's passion and care and wanting to move Oroville forward. That's amazing, and we want to see that grow because I think that we'll all be better for it. But that's where I'm at right now. Those are my comments at the moment, waiting to hear from others.
Mr. Mayor, before we go on, could we get Ms. Hood up? Okay. Jane, I just want to ensure with you that nothing else has been submitted. There are no other maps that are available. Over the last 2 weeks, I've been told multiple times by multiple people they were submitting maps. So I just want to ensure there's nothing else out there for our community to consider or our council.
Yeah, thank you for that question. There are no new public submissions that we received. So there could have been people looking at the maps online or drawing things, but they did not end up submitting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pittman.
Yeah, I have a question for Ms. Hood, too. In your work on these redistricting situations, I'll call them that, to be kind, have you seen a similar situation in Oroville with the historic district trying to be left whole as a community of interest, or any other districts that have a designation, say a certain planning area or a subdivision name? What are the community of interest identifiers have you seen?
Yeah, so communities of interest are, increasingly a big consideration in redistricting, and really they're up to interpretation because they're so contextual, right? What brings a community together is very different, as you were talking about in San Francisco versus Oroville. So they really do look different, but a very common one would be, obviously historic funding or, history of the area like we have here. Also schools are a big one. So sometimes people are brought together by all of their kids attend the same school. Maybe they're trying to bring businesses into their area and, have some economic development. It's really pretty open to interpretation, and the law kind of leaves it open to what the community sees as their community. And so we've obviously heard from the community in Oroville about what that looks like, at least in the historic area.
The second part of my question is, if they take a particular community of interest and decide to try to give it 2 different representatives instead of 1, did you see them cut the community of interest in half?
So in per the Fair Maps Act and the criteria that we are following for redistricting, once they've been identified as a community of interest, that is, we're supposed to keep that together to the extent practicable. So in at least for, this purpose of this process, ideally it's to keep the communities together. Obviously, certain communities maybe find it that they would like to be in 2 districts or multiple districts, and that, they don't necessarily, we don't hear from them. And so that sort of distinguishment. So some communities might want to be in multiple areas, that's fine. But once they've identified themselves as a community of interest, that's sort of, for the redistricting purposes, something we should consider keeping together if possible.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try and be brief. I've listened to all of you. I believe that I know that I've worked on and restored more houses and more buildings in the historical district than maybe all of you put together. And I too have a love for Oroville and that precious part of it. But I have a love for all of it too. And this districting is so hard on all of us. I agree with Mr. O'Reilly. We ran to represent Oroville. And here we are being forced to divide ourselves once again. We only want this part in our club or in our neighborhood. We're only going to let you in the door. And I think that we've come a long way to get past all of that. I drove around South Oroville yesterday for over an hour, just looking at all the work that's been done and all the work that needs to be done. There was some young men out on the street, standing around, talking, enjoying the sunshine, and I stopped and talked to them. I know I can do that in any neighborhood. How would we all feel if we said, we only want Canyon Highlands in our group? We only want the East Oroville in our group because we have similar interests, economic interests, whatever they might be. It's just creating division. It really, and to know, I know most of you, and you're wonderful people, but some of these emails we got with the threatening and the just over and over, and it gets to a point where it's an obsession, in my opinion. And it saddens me to think that once again, here we are drawing lines and telling, whether we say it out loud or not, we're telling, I heard some of the letters. We only want this group in our neighborhood, this historical district. Well, essentially what you could be saying to a lot of other people is, we don't want you included. And although that wasn't exactly what was said, it could be construed that way. And I think that I was elected to represent the whole town. I enjoy the whole town. And in historical buildings, houses, we have historical houses in Thermalito. We have historical houses in South Oroville. We have historical houses in East Oroville. They're strewn about because they didn't used to be in a concentrated area. And you can tell the historical houses are where they once were. You know, we had a historical building out in Thermalito that was called the Oddfellows Building. It was huge. You could still see the palm trees that line the driveway going in there. We have a love for the whole community. My family's been here since 1870. You've heard me say it. We are in the history books. When people want to know about history, they come and speak to my father, to Miss Linhoff's father. These are the historians. These are the ones. My father's 92. We grew up here. Our family and friends are buried here. Not only do they live here, but they're buried here. This is who we are. So this is one of the hardest things that we have faced on this council. It seems like we're going backwards. Only this for these people and this for these people. I really hope that we can get past it. Whatever. You know what? I'm still at large. I have no dog in the fight, if you will, other than to see the whole community enjoy each other's friendship, friendly, neighborly attitudes. We've had some wonderful additions to our town, absolutely wonderful. And thank you. God bless you for being so passionate about where you live. I know that I met some of you. I was probably the first person you met when you came to town because I was called to look at your historical house to see if it was stable. To see if the foundation was intact. I know nearly all of you. So please, no matter what happens here, let's not walk away thinking that these guys, we're against these guys or they're against us, because it's simply not true. We're all from Oroville, and we all want to support one another. So that's true. This particular neighborhood or area has been very boisterous. Appreciate that. That means that there are some good organizers in that neighborhood. Appreciate that. Very involved. But that doesn't mean that we don't have people throughout the town who don't care just as much, who want to protect their neighborhood just as much. And it really saddens me to know what's coming with these district lines, because in reality, I don't know what you think you're going to get or what the council represents, but in reality, we are only 1 of 7 votes. You can't come in here and say, we want money for our district only. We don't care what's going on there. We want this. It's not going to happen. You need the rest of the council. We have to work together. Please start building on that now, because we're not going to get anywhere if we start dividing ourselves by what our best interests are. So pretty soon we're going to be questioning people that are driving down our street. Those young men could have questioned me yesterday. What are you doing here? You know what they said? Hey, how you doing? What are you up to? And I said the same, because that's our town. So, Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to just echo what you're saying. Each council person needs, 4 votes to get something done. And again, I think the passion is awesome and amazing. And then I support that fully. The part that's concerning is the contentious piece of the hyper focus, and because you're going to need whoever this person is, because you're going to have a downtown district, and we're going to get there, And you're going to have somebody that's going to be elected in the future that's going to represent this area. But you have to remember that person's got to work with the full council and be able to garner, that support and cooperation. And so, and again, just because of this process, it creates contention. We don't need that. We don't want that. We need to work together. And just saying, again, back to the other maps, or the other map that I was mentioning, I feel it does mix it up a little bit. Just food for thought, again, when you look at crossing over the river, what would be the area of interest? Flood. So the downtown is flooded in the past, if you know the history. Some of you have probably done the homework. And the folks that live just on the other side of the river, they have a like concern. There's a huge population of homelessness just on the other side of the river that travel across the bridge and then come down into the downtown. They live over there. They move from over there to over here. So there is a lot of cross issues there that area does involve the downtown. I'm just saying, I don't know if you've thought about that. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. So, I know you're advocating map 29 or 1. Maybe in the end that's the best map. Maybe it's not. Because again, because you don't have somebody that's having to worry about just on the other side of the river and that community and those homes just on the other side. Does the historic downtown have like interest with the folks just on the other side of the river and that little bit of housing community that's there? Because remember, we're talking about votes, not businesses. It's about 3,000 people that live in homes that's contiguous. I'm putting that out there for you all to think about and to consider and to think, and because I think these are important issues to consider. And I'm not sure in this process, because we haven't really talked much about this until now. Well, what does that look like? What does that mean? How are these communities of interest? What are the interests, and so on and so forth? And so again, the east side of the town, I would say the urban wildland interface is a huge concern. The community around the airport, obviously that goes without saying, right? Airport and air encroachment and planes and size of planes landing. And so, the south end of town, it's had its own challenges, all of these make sense, to a degree, and then Thermalito and its own concerns. But I'm just broadcasting, I don't think it's been fully thought through in terms of, if I'm a council person, I'm representing a historic area and all of those concerns. I would think that the impacts coming from the other side, just on the other side of the river, that there is, and or up around the high school, a lot of the construction was in the same time period. There are historic buildings. The high school is historic. I'm just wanting you to, just again, you all don't agree with that, or some of you don't, but I do believe, and we'll see into the future how that rolls. But I just think it is something to be considered.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, since we're all here and there seems to be some interest in that map, why don't we have Ms. Hood bring up that map and see if we can all together create something that works for all of us.
29 or 29?
53 is the one that's been being talked about. We have to have a willingness to work. We can't just say, no, we're not doing that. We're all here to work.
Vice Mayor Thompson's in the queue.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll figure it out. Actually, my meeting starts in 5 minutes, but I really appreciate all you coming out and speaking, and I'm sure that we'll all come to a census that, just to the most part, will be amicable about. But
excuse me, keep order, please.
So with that, I'm sorry I got to go, but this is a previously scheduled meeting that I have every week, and I can't miss it. So thank you, guys.
Councilmember Pittman.
Yeah, thank you. The discussion about the high school being a historic building, just for information, the historic building was torn down in 1969. I was there when it was torn down, the original building. So the rest of the Oroville High School is not historic. I mean, I saw it being built, folks, so I'm not that old. So that area of Orange Heights essentially was developed in the 40s and 50s. There was a few homes that were originally built, and then the subdivision went bankrupt. So you see the older Sears-style homes, if you know what I'm talking about. They have a little sharp pitched front, a little porch in front. Those were kit homes that you bought from Sears and built during the early part of the 40s, and then the subdivision went bankrupt, and now it's built out to what it is now. We have Hammond Avenue, Grandview, Gawthorne, and then the other side of Orange Avenue, where Brereton Way in that area, that's kind of been built up over the 40s and 50s. So you have different areas of build out. Whereas downtown, your build out started in what was it? 1856. So you got a completely different area. So I appreciate the discussion about, areas of community of interest, but I don't think you can make any mixture of downtown historic and mixtures of any other area in Oroville. The oldest part of this town is downtown historic, clearly, without question. And the rest of the areas, the East Oroville, even Thermalito, they're way behind in terms of that. There's a few places that are spot builds, but the whole town's historic, essentially, in some respects. But the interest issues of downtown are clearly different than Orange Heights and the high school and Stanford Avenue, Canyon Highlands, all those areas. That subdivision, Coventry, Wildwood, that was built in the 50s. So there's a lot of differences we could put on ages, but the community of interest has to have some measure. And as the consultant said, you don't want to split that up. It's not a good idea, especially after you've identified it. You don't have a definition after that. So that's just my comment. So I appreciate that. Where we're going to?
I want to comment a little bit on that. I mean, again, and there's no doubt the historical district is precious to all of us. But are we going to build walls and protect our own and our own little group, or are we going to represent everyone and break? And I would like the town to work together, not separate ourselves by where we live or how old our house is, because I think that a person that lives a block over from the historical district probably feels just as strongly about their house. Excuse me, will you keep order, please? You're distracting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I don't think that we can tell the people that live a block out of the historical district that their home ownership or their pride in where they live is any less genuine than our own. Mr. Huber, will you read to us in order the considerations for this?
Yeah, you caught me a little off guard, Mr. Mayor, but absolutely, I'll pull them up. While I'm doing that, one of the first consideration is the population of the district, of the voting district, and one of the things that I think is important to understand is the fact that you have a community of interest. If it is not sufficient enough population-wise, you have to add to it to make it so that the map is ultimately justifiable. That's the number one. The number one item from the Fair Maps Act is, and again, Jane can correct me if I'm wrong here, but is the population has to be within a certain percentage, or else if it's outside of 5%, it's deemed unacceptable.
I understand.
Would you like me to share this slide?
Yeah, please. I was actually just looking for your slide, to read from. Yes. Jane, that'd be great. Thank you.
No problem. So then everyone can see it. Give me 1 second. Changing the screen I'm sharing. Here they are. These criteria are ranked in order, all starting with to the extent practicable. So the first one is compliance with the US and California Constitution. And here, as the city attorney mentioned, this is mostly in reference to equalizing the population across the districts. The second one is compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act. And this is particularly to address racial and language minority voting rights. The third one is contiguity, making sure that all of the districts are contiguous, so they're all in one piece, basically, not split up. The fourth is to respect local neighborhoods and communities of interest. And here, respecting means to minimize their division. And we'll note that communities of interest cannot include relationships to political parties. Number 5 is that boundaries should be easily identifiable and understandable by residents. So this means generally they're bounded by streets, rivers, things that make sense. The sixth one is compactness, and that's if it does not conflict with the preceding criteria. And then the last one, again, we just have to make sure we're not favoring or discriminating against political parties in this process.
Thank you. Are those are they in matter of order for interest?
They are ranked in order of importance, yes.
So actually number 4 is communities of interest.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Does anyone have anything else? We had public input. You had your time. I'm looking for a motion here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a couple different options at this point. If the council so chooses, they can identify a map and move forward with the map. You can work on a map if you'd like to try to work on a different map. Or you could, we can continue this. I mean, this is not something that, cannot be continued to another date if that's what the council so chooses. I mean, so you have multiple options. Staff would prefer that we pick a map, but I understand that's just what we would like. I mean, so whatever, the council believes is in the best interest, those are your options. You have to move forward. So whichever you'd like to do, Ms. Hood's here. If you would like to try to create a map, you can certainly do that. If you'd like to just pick one of the identified maps that already exist, you can certainly do that as well.
Councilmember Pittman.
Yeah, thank you. Re-looking at the mapping criteria, I have to state that map 29 certainly fills all the criteria. It makes it very clear boundaries, utilizing streets, and we're not cutting the middle through any oddball places, so the public understands what district they live in. That's going to be a difficult thing, especially, as I said before, the upcoming election. There's 2 districts. They will not get a ballot for a councilman, which I find, again, appalling. Commenting on map 53, I think the District C, cutting up District F, makes it very confusing. I mean, I know this town by my memory because of the business I was in. I could tell you where every street and everything is in this town, and I'm confused by just looking at that map. So I don't understand the need for that particular map boundaries at all. When I look at 20 or I look at 40 or map 1, boundaries are very clear. It's a roadway, and it's easy. Which side of the road do you live on, and you know which district you're in. I think that's probably more important than anything going on here, because yes, we're all going to represent you all. We're all going to spend your dollar, but to have irregular boundaries, I don't think map 53 satisfies that. I mean, it does have irregular boundaries, and it confuses me, and I think we'll just confuse the public on that in the future. And I think it totally cuts up the historic district entirely by the river. I mean, you have both sides of the river. You're going to be in Thermalito. Well, Thermalito is a different animal. Thermalito doesn't have flood issues, folks. It's 300-foot elevation. The river is 247-foot elevation. Every flood we've ever had, Thermalito wasn't threatened, except the last one, which nobody knows where that was going to go. But I've evacuated this town at least 3 times, and we don't worry about Thermalito in a flood. We worry about downtown Oroville. And but we now have a new billion-dollar spillway that we shouldn't have to worry about a flood. Frankly, if that dam doesn't work right, then we all got a problem. So I think the community of interest strength is in downtown, and I think that's why you're all interested here. I mean, as the vice mayor said, it's a tough place to live, but you guys love living there. So how we cannot respect that just defies my intelligence. I mean, that's what we're elected to do, is represent you people, and you came here very strongly and have a very clear message. So I think that, if anything, you're interested, and that's what we should be responding to, not putting in a map that has confusing borders and streets. So that's my comment at this point.
Councilmember Goodson.
I recommend that the council move forward with map 29.
I would second that, Rep.
Councilmember Riggs.
I just hoped that Ms. Hood could overlay 29 and 40, because we talked a lot about 29. It was an early favorite. However, 40 is quite similar, and it has less percentage differences, which I favor mathematically. And I've tried doing that. Not as visual as I'd hope I was. Do you know that you're not sharing your screen? Okay.
Here it comes.
Thank you. So here is map 40, and I will overlay it with map 29, just show the differences here. And so really the main difference here you'll see is this corner, which I can zoom in on. And so for map 40 goes all the way down to Oro Dam Boulevard.
Oh.
Whereas map 29 actually turns on Mitchell Avenue. So that's one of the differences in this central area between map 29 and map 40. Other than that, they are very similar. We'll have this one difference between District D and E here, this small area, but pretty much everything else is the same.
Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to finish up some of my comments, some of my comments are directly related to some of the email I think that our mayor was alluding to earlier. Some of it was very terse, maybe is a word, and I'm not sure where or why that was being generated, because again, we're having this process. We're able to come and share, and I was sharing my concerns with 29 and 1 in that it does break up things a little bit. I appreciate the history and the knowledge that Councilman Pittman brings. And some of my comments are designed, because I do work with the downtown, the bid, and with lots of groups. And I just want everyone to be thinking Oroville, not just our little spot. And I just think that's so important that we consider the whole town. And like I said earlier, I'm disappointed that we didn't have other folks from other parts of the city here voicing their concerns for whatever reason. And so for me this evening, it was just a challenge coming from me to the process, to think about Oroville, as the mayor expressed, that we're pro Oroville. I'm at the end of the day comfortable with map 29. In fact, you guys stole it from me, because I was going to actually go there and do that. But again, I'm voicing from the contentious emails and some of the things, chatter that have been going on in the community. And I just want all of us to think about as a town, as a community, and not just my little space. And moving forward, I'm just concerned that districting at some point will produce that. And on some level, it already has. Here we are. It's happened. And that's not healthy. And so we have to work together as a team to not allow that contention to get on us, because I live, so why, just for hypotheticals, why should I, once we're districted, be concerned about what happens in the south part of town or over in Thermalito? I mean, there is that element. Now, we all are at-large elected council people, and so I think by our very nature, we do care, and we will continue to care corporately. But I think going forward, there is that danger that could arise, and so that's always concerning. But I'm prepared to make a vote on map 29. So,
Councilmember Riggs.
Thank you. I'm going to say it more personally, which is out of character for me, I believe, but that's all right. I'll share personally that from reading those emails and from some of the statements made by many of you, of which I know and have worked with closely, that my personal feelings have been hurt as a council member who fights for the downtown district. I could guarantee you, if you talk to Bill about how often I bring up downtown, it's about every single time we chit-chat. And so, on a personal basis, this process is difficult. And that is inflated when it is posed to feel like you guys aren't representing us. Nobody's paying attention to downtown, because many of us are. And many of us are fighting for downtown. And not all of us voted for that liquor store. And many of us have fought for the improvements that you guys very much enjoy. So that is my personal note, because I do respect and love all of you guys. And I want to echo that even though there's districting, we are still one community, and we are still needed to work together and to move downtown and every other neighborhood forward. But I still love you guys too.
If there are no other, Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, and just one more, since we've been kind of I've been the most vocal on another map, so I'm sure I'm going to feel the heat, but and that's okay. But I just want to say this: I think that the downtown district and the south part of town, as was commented by Mr. Mayor, by Mayor Reynolds at the last council meeting, has received a lot of attention. It receives a lot of SBF funding. Hundreds of thousands of dollars come into the downtown through that process, which is, a lot of communities don't have that. It's a blessing. What a wonderful gift. And we should get more. And that's another conversation, right? But I think there's been tremendous focus. And we can do more, we can do better, always can improve. But I just want to say, I think that there is a lot of focus, a lot of attention, a lot of concern for, in particular, the south part of town, which was recently adopted, right, annexed. And so there's a lot of catch-up work that as a city we have to do, and it's a heavy lift, but we'll get there. And we will continue to be concerned even after we're districted. And again, the downtown does receive an enormous amount of attention and consideration. And as we are doing here tonight, we're hearing you. I'm hearing you. I'm hearing this is the map that we want. And so I want you to know that the process works. So those of you that feel like the process doesn't work, you don't hear our voice, you don't pay attention to what we have to say. Yeah, we do. And I've heard you, and I respect that. And so that's how I will be voting tonight. Thank you.
I'll comment on what you said, Councilmember Smith, because I'm on the SBF, and we've actually handed out millions of dollars to the downtown area. And it gets a lot of attention. And those emails saying there's no representation, there's no, you've been excluded. I'll take it personally too, and it hurts feelings. So Personally, I please maintain your composures. I mean, it's unbecoming. So we have a, excuse me, we have a motion and a second.
Motion carries with 5 yeses, 1 abstention, and 1 absent.
Mr. Mayor,
we will adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, before we just, convene the meeting, I just have a question for Mr. Huber. If we could just get just some clarity on our next step forward on this. The ordinance, Mr. Huber, will include the order in which the districts will be elected. In 2020, we adopted a ordinance that included that. Do we follow the same one, or do we establish that at the next meeting? Is that something the council should be considering between now and then?
It's a lot wrapped up into one. Let me try and unpack that. To the extent that this varies from what was previously, adopted, if the majority of, if only lines have slightly changed from what was previously adopted, then you should try and keep the districts the same as the order of election as what they were before. If this varies to any significant degree, then the council should be considering which ones should be up in 2022 and which ones should be up in 2024.
Okay. Okay, so what we'll do is we will prepare the ordinance similar to what we did last time. We will leave that open so that it very well could be the same, or it could be changed. But I would advise the council to start considering that about the order that these will be in. It's the order that currently exists in the ordinance that we adopted last year.
Yeah, one of the criteria, and again, it's a very, very much lower criteria. In fact, I think it's the lowest one on the list, is respecting the previous will of the voters. To the extent you have an area that has a sole council member in that area, then that area should coincide with the expiration of the at-large seat of that council member.
Yes, sir.
Just as a general rule, you want to honor the will of the voters. Now, you can make a very strong argument, well, the voters haven't had their will because it's this brand new map. I get that. Having said that, if there is a district with one council member in it, in this new map area, it would be appropriate to keep that expiration date with the expiration of the general term. Does that make sense?
I think where the ambiguity comes in is the fact that the map that was originally adopted in 2020 was an exercise in an exercise. And so it never was used. There was never no possibility. So that's where the confusion comes in. But anyway, I understand your direction, and we'll move forward with that.
I could make it less clear if you want me to.
That's fine. So can I. I mean, ask anybody to talk to me.
Councilmember Goodson.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to something that Councilman Smith said in regards to, at the end of the day, when we're all representing different districts, why should one council person advocate for another's challenges? Or so in answer, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was JFK who so appropriately stated that when the tide comes in, all the boats float. So that's my response to you.
And I agree with that. I think that's true.
Well, with that, we will close the public hearing at 7:24, and we will adjourn till January 18, 2022 at 4 p.m. Meeting adjourned.
That was fun, huh?
Hey, to you. How are you?
It's not that we're excluding those other areas.
Right.